Welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is Entertainment News on Channels Television. Now, Ugandan British filmmaker Norman Busigu, who already made two critically acclaimed docu-movies about Ghana and Nigeria, is on his journey to make a third, this time linking Africans and the Caribbeans. The actor, model, and broadcaster is inspired by a strong desire to tell African stories from an African perspective. He now joins me on the program from London. Many thanks for joining me, Norman, and it's great to see you again, even if it's virtually.
Yes, in Lagos when I was there. Missed it so much. I'm overdue a trip back to Lagos. I had so much fun there, and yeah, no, it's been great to see how things have developed, back in Lagos. So yeah, no, great to see you too.
Beautiful. It's good to hear you say all those kind words. Thank you. And yes, last time we spoke, it was about 2 years ago when you came to make that documentary film about Nigerian young people and their role in Nigeria's growth. Of course, that has been released and enjoys significant reception. Tell us about its success and also the biggest lessons you've learned about young people living in Nigeria.
Oh, those are great questions. Okay, so in terms of successes, so I had a string of amazing screening events to showcase the film. So one was at an independent cinema called the Lecti Cinema, Soho House, the Private Members Club, which is all over the world and very long-standing renowned reputation. It's screened in the UK, in Paris, and in Miami. So it's screened across Europe, America, and the UK, which was a big step for me because it exposed me to new markets for the first time. So in terms of my key learnings about Nigerians, and Nigerian youth, what I'll say from my perspective is, well, people think I'm Nigerian. That's the first thing, right? So I'm Ugandan. I'm Ugandan. People think I'm Nigerian because of just my energy, my my gravitas, right? And I have a lot of Nigerian friends, to be fair, and Nigerians are in the plenty in London. So I think I've just absorbed a lot of their energy. I think many times the confidence of Nigerians can be conflated for arrogance in the sense of how can you be so confident? That's something I've observed about how sometimes Nigerians can be perceived. This is from my personal experience of seeing how they're perceived. Going to Nigeria, Nigerians now make a lot more sense to me. And I just understand it's pride. Nigerians have like this pride instilled in their DNA. Like, I'm going to be the best, or I'm going to get it, I'm going to succeed, And so from the way the youth dress, I went to Seoul Beach one time, and the way Nigerians dress, like Nigerians are fly. If we look at, again, Afro beats, the music, the genre, Nollywood, you guys know what you're doing when it comes to fashion. But just even in an everyday sense, like Nigerian youth are fly. Like they just look cool, you know what I mean? And there's a certain energy and swag that you guys move and a confidence that's very loud. It's a very loud, I'm here, I'm proud. And going to Nigeria really showed me, help me to understand that's just who you guys are. It's not arrogance, it's not ego, it's just your DNA.
Awesome and brilliant point. Now you have mentioned that a major goal for you is reframing narratives because a lot of Western media still show Africans in a limited or negative way. Now, have you ever been caught yourself almost falling into those same stereotypes? And when you were making these films, how do you make sure your stories show a fuller, truer picture? I mean, you must be authentic with your movies.
That's such a great question. Thank you for asking that. So I'd be lying to you if I said I haven't fallen in the trap. And as someone who is British Ugandan and grew up, born and raised Northwest London, Western media is the way that I understood and saw the world, right? I'm 29 years old now, so growing up in the 2000s, this was in the era before smartphones and the internet at large, where YouTube was just an app where there were funny videos about cats. Like, it wasn't a thing where you would go on and really, it's like an encyclopedia of the world. YouTube wasn't that thing yet, nor was the internet as accessible, right? Controlled media was very controlled back then, whereas now it's a lot more, people can come in and do what they want to do with it. But because of that, and the way in which I understood Africa was through what I was seeing in terms of documentaries or charity specials and all those things, where they would go to Africa and, for the most part, from my personal experience, speaking for myself, what I would tend to see, especially growing up, was very one-dimensional perspective, which was, embezzlement, poverty, suffering. And that's not to say those things don't exist. They do, because those things are being shown and recorded, right? So they do exist. But the issue that I had was, there's so much more going on. This isn't just almost like a land of just suffering and pain and famine, right? And there was another rich side to the culture, nature, beauty, the everyday life that was like, wow, so okay, it's not just this land of just pain and suffering and everyone needs help sort of thing. No, like people, the things people are doing well are doing very well over there, and people who are very intelligent. And so again, there's a whole sort of relearning process that had to take place in many ways for me, and that came from just having time on the ground in Uganda and then spending time in Ghana and then in Nigeria, right? Now, to your second question about how do I go about making my stories being as authentic as possible, I'm very intentional about working with production companies on the ground where I film. I don't ever want to take the approach of flying out with members of my team, getting some footage and then leaving. I want to make sure that I'm contributing to the creative ecosystems and the local economy of the places that I'm going to, because that's how I'm really able to, gain that cultural access and how I'm able to make sure that I'm telling stories authentically and letting people have the microphone and not just me narrating it. People that are living, camera people that are living and working on the ground, they're able to suggest, okay, no, Norman, let's actually go here to get this shot. Or I have connections at this site so we can film here. Or instead of saying it in this phrase, say it in that way because it makes things more real, sort of thing. Or I have a friend that I think would want to be interviewed by you, and they can offer their perspectives. And that happened on all occasions, right? And that's a whole series of stories in of itself, right? In terms of both films and how they came to be. But in some, that's how I've managed, I'd like to think, to make my stories authentic. And I think that's why they've been able to resonate, because they're very real. And I'm engaging people on the ground and I'm paying them as well.
Your upcoming docu-film connects Africa with Caribbean. What do you think stories like this can do for how the world sees Black identity, creativity, and do you see these kinds of connection leading to real collaborations?
Great question. I think so. Go through that in reverse. I think we're already starting to see that collaboration. From what I've heard recently, there's a new flight route to be announced between Nigeria and Jamaica. So we're starting to see that greater focus on trade between the two worlds and finding ways to link the two worlds in that sense. And I think those sorts of initiatives are so important because for the first time now, we're having direct links between Africa and the Caribbean. There's a direct flight route. And with that direct trade route, through our own mechanisms, I think opens up a world of opportunity, right? So that's the first thing. But actually, I think for the first time in history, as a diaspora, we're starting to have real cross-cultural dialogue, right? And I say that because of the power of the internet. When I think about my parents' generation, so they came to the UK in the 90s, they were in their sort of mid-20s, right? This is before social media, before the internet at large. The way they would communicate to their family back home was through, my mum would tell me, like writing letters or those old school like phone scratch cards. You buy like a £10 talk home card and it has a certain amount of credit on it. You dial a number and then you talk for like an hour or so, right? You couldn't, me and you right now, you're in Nigeria right now, we're doing a Zoom call. This wasn't possible 30, 40 years ago, right? So for the first time, we're really starting to have real cross-cultural dialogue. And why that's so important is because I think for the first time we're realizing how similar we are, you know, and how so many of our cultures, though they are different and they have their nuances, as a people, as Black people, we have so many underlying similarities and foundations that unite us. And I think now, because of the internet, we're really starting to have these conversations because I haven't got to fly to Jamaica to speak to a Jamaican, right? That's like live there or living there. I can have a Zoom call with them. And likewise, right? So because of that, I think we're in a unique space and time where the diaspora in particular are really facilitating cross-cultural dialogue. And that's now started to blend with those of us back home, i.e. on the continent or, in the islands in the Caribbean. And this idea of like the distinction between the continent and the diaspora is starting to blend. And for that, I have to really point towards the power of like the arts. So like Afrobeats, which is like one of like, from an artistic standpoint, one of Africa's biggest cultural exports, right? What the power of the music video has done. Like, I always think about like Wizkid's music video, Ojo Legba, right? Where he's in his, his home area, he's on the bus, he's walking around. I remember when I first watched that music video, I just thought, this reminds me of Kampala.
So you have pretty much touched on a part of my last question, and that is Hollywood's penetration is second to none.
personal experience. So again, as an independent filmmaker, I've had my film screened at the Members Club Soho House, in the UK, Europe, America, shortlisted for film festivals in Europe and America. Lots of press, from again, GQ South Africa to Rolling Stone Africa to now Forbes Africa, just as of yesterday. Yahoo Finance, so American publication, PR Newswire, and again in Uganda and in Ghana. So from my experience, what I would say from my experience to answer that question is, whatever it is you're trying to do, try to do it in the most pure way and in a way that makes sense to people that you're trying to present it to, right? So I'm going to break this down. I made a film about Ghana in 2021, straight 2022. We made the film. I then approached Soho House. I showed them a trailer and I thoroughly explained why this film means so much to me, why I think people at large need to understand why the Ghanaian tourism industry is so special and why its ecosystem is one that really is a fertile ground that invites, members of the diaspora and the wider world globally to visit Africa. Hence why I titled the film Ghana, Africa's exciting entry point. What is it about this country that when people go to Africa for the first time, Ghana tends to be that point of reference or entry, right? So I made the story, I presented the story in a way that could translate for those that aren't necessarily from an African audience. And I'm glad you made this point about, Hollywood and media, media outlets and publications that aren't necessarily African, because the reality is, while it's great to have amplification in our community, we're trying to go global and we're trying to get this out to the world. So we have to, it's a fine line and it's a balancing act, right? You want to preserve the quality and the authenticity and the purity of what our culture is, but equally you need to present it in a way that will make sense to external audiences, right? So if, let's say I made a film, but it was full of just colloquialisms and let's say, oh, Wahala Day or Chale, but there was no explanation as to what these things meant, then if somebody who wasn't from our cultures was watching this, they wouldn't understand what they were watching. Do you see what I mean? So in terms of that penetration, it's a balancing act, I think, of maintaining the purity of the story that you're trying to tell, but then also understanding the market you're trying to get it into. And then from that, making it in a way that's understandable to those different environments.
Many thanks for joining us, Norman, and we wish you all of the best.
And can I just say thank you for thank you for having me back on, and thank you for the great work you're doing, for us as a people, and just staying in touch with me and amplifying my work. I really appreciate it.
Now that's the show for today. Many thanks for being a part of it. My name is Abide Midairo, and it's bye for now.